Welcome to the WWH show. This is a show that asks a series of why, what, and how questions on topics that have national, regional, and global significance and implications. Today we have such a topic to discuss about. Here in this studio, I have a privilege to discuss this topic with Martin Parlette. He is a technologist and also he has been working with world-class technology companies, and he has also his own technology company called Peanut. Martin, thank you very much for being here and ready to share our audience about the topic, which is why Ethiopia has been lagging behind in using IT, which is information technology.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Exactly. To provide a little bit background to you guys, let's give you a little bit statistics before we talk about why Ethiopia has been lagging behind in using information technology. Ethiopia is not only lagging the African average internet access, she has been lagging behind with her neighbors. For example, Eritrea, she has 5.9% internet access. Djibouti, 9.5%. Kenya, 47.3%. Ethiopia, 1% of internet access. So it's very, very well behind the African average, even well behind its neighbors.
Oh yes, the developing countries are so far beyond this, and we're gonna show you some statistics in a little while that will bear this out. But this at 1.9%, that is not keeping up with the world market at all.
Exactly. One surprising data I found out also is that Ethiopia's fixed broadband access rate is 0.25%. This is from Freedom House, a very reputable, great international organization. They reported that internet access is 1.9% and fixed broadband access is 0.25%. A very disappointing access rate in the 21st century.
Well, in the developing countries, that is just unacceptable. Broadband is a critical part of the infrastructure that our businesses use to communicate globally, to do commerce globally. And so when you don't have that kind of bandwidth, you're not able to compete on that world market.
Impossible. So that means Ethiopia, if she wants us to grow and develop, she has to adopt technologies, including the internet, and give access to its business people at least, so that people could do business, using online e-commerce and so on and so forth.
Well, not just, and business is one area, but then the area of education is dramatic. You just finished a PhD at Regent University, and the majority of that was done online.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, distance learning and online learning has become a central part of our education process. So if you don't have the bandwidth, you cannot have the video requirements and the information exchange. It just is not going to be possible if you don't have that broadband access.
You reminded me about one of my colleagues. He came to Regent like myself in 2009. He came for the first residency. He attended the first residency. He was so happy. He returned back home to finish the program for that year. He went back because of lack of broadband access. He couldn't be able to continue his education, so he withdrew.
Right.
That was very sad.
So here we have someone who is seeking a PhD and seeking it for the betterment of his community. And he's not allowed to do it because he doesn't have the bandwidth to support the technology that he needed to take the course. And so that's a sad story and the thing is that's going to be very commonplace when you don't have access to this technology.
Exactly. So the question I have been asking, I've been asking in the background some technocrats, Ethiopian technocrats. And I was asking them why Ethiopia has been lagging behind in using internet and other technologies. And they told me that this is political reasons. Because there is no way that infrastructure or human resource like technocrats are the problem. The problem is political, and they reason out that when people are empowered by having access to information through internet, they are empowered. When they are empowered, they're going to ask tough questions. They're going to challenge faulty policies of the government, and they pressure the government to make changes. So the government doesn't want people to be empowered, and that's why the government is not providing access to internet to its people.
And it is a logical conclusion to come to, because this is so readily available, that there has to be a force other than the technology itself that's preventing it from being implemented. And so I agree with your assessment. I think that it is political. And what we want to do with this program, I know that is your heart, is to give people information about what's possible.
Yes.
And then they can start asking those questions, seeking out those solutions, and bringing that technology to their community for business development and education.
Exactly. But, I don't want to just point to the government and say that this is the government who is responsible for us lagging behind in using technology. I was also talking to some of my friends about, can we take, as a people and culture, can we take some responsibilities about why we are lagging in using technologies? Because in the past, we had an emperor called Emperor Menelik II. He was an advanced king because he was introducing technologies to the country, like cars, telephones, and theaters, and so on. At that time, the population, especially the religious elites, they called him, he brings technologies that are the devil. And I still remember there is one place called the House of the Devil, which is a theater, house, hall, and it's called the Devil's House. When the emperor was talking to people through phone, they say, hey, he's talking to the devil. When he was using the car, they were complaining, so they didn't want to buy into technologies that time.
But it sounds like almost a religious resistance, a misunderstanding, a lack of understanding of what the technology was and what it would provide, a fear, if you will. And I remember my grandmother, when they first got electricity back in the early 1900s, they were afraid of the socket on the wall because they felt like some voodoo or something was going to come out of the wall, and they were afraid of it. So I understand that when we don't understand, that we can be afraid.
Exactly. So I brought this because yes, the government, because of political reasons, it doesn't want to open up so that people have access to the internet and get information and get empowered. But as people, we should also challenge ourselves in terms of, are we really pro-technologies, pro-internet, pro-technologies? And so we have to challenge ourselves. I brought that because, sometimes, in the past, during the Emperor Menelik era, these were the people challenging him from advancing. Now, this is the government who is trying to prevent people from accessing technologies. It's a paradox in the same country. But still, the people, especially people who have access to technology, people who are educated, people who are young, they should be pro-technologies. Even if the government is cramming them somewhere, even if the government is not allowing them to have access to technologies, they should take their own initiatives.
Well, and the thing is, taking the initiative requires that you understand what's going on, and you understand how it can benefit you. Now, if I may, I'd like to show your viewers something about knowledge itself, because why do we need the internet? Why do we need this? Has this really had any real impact on the world? Well, let's look at this chart. That if we were to put on a graph, somehow represent how much knowledge man had acquired from the beginning of time all the way up until 1850, we could represent it on that graph as 1 inch. And then, between 1850 and 1950, there was obviously an enlightenment in the United States, because an incredible amount of invention took place during that period. And now the knowledge has tripled. In just that 100 years, the knowledge tripled. But then, from 1950 to 1980, and now we're talking about the advent of the computer, and toward the end of that period, the internet, we went from 1 inch from all of time 3 times as much during that 100 years of 1850 to 1950. From 1950 to 1980, we'd have to represent the knowledge gain on that graph as the size of a very, very large building. And then, since 1980, and now that's when the internet and computer technology really took off, knowledge has been doubling every 4 years. Now, if knowledge is doubling every 4 years, then we need to ask ourselves, are we putting ourselves in a place to be able to learn from that? Are we in a place where we can have access to that information and that knowledge? And you see, the reason why knowledge is doubling every 4 years is because of the internet. No longer do I have to go to a book, an old book, a book that's out of date to find out a piece of information. I can go to the internet and find something that was current yesterday. So I can learn so much. But this is why the world is developing the way it is. It is one single thing, and it is computer technology and the internet. That is why we have an explosion of knowledge.
That's amazing data, and it's very telling how knowledge is very powerful, and these days we have the possibility to go out and get information, knowledge, and that empowers us to develop our country, develop our community, and transform our community from poverty into prosperity, from being in a system that doesn't provide people justice, democracy, and so on, into a society which has access to justice, democracy, and the rule of law.
Right. And that is, when people have knowledge, when they have information, they can make better life decisions. They can make better life decisions for themselves, for their education, for their health, for their families. Also, it's a wonderful way to be part of an innovative, creative process, inventing. All of these things that we see around us, we didn't have them 100 years ago. It's because as technology has been increasing, we now have access to more ideas, and we can now put those ideas together, creating even more new ideas. So this is how innovation and invention is made possible. And so, again, not just getting ourselves from a poverty to prosperity situation, but a place where we can produce and have just have vital services that enable people to have better quality food and better quality living conditions, and just all the things that we're yearning for will come as we grow in our knowledge, and then we go out and apply that knowledge to our lives out in our communities. And I know that's where your heart is.
Oh, yeah, because, even if the government is limiting and restraining and so on, people should believe that knowledge is power to transform the country. Knowledge empowers people, individuals. When individuals are empowered, they will be contributors to the development of their community and country. But how much my community, and also other developing countries, how much are we open to adopt technologies? How far we can go, even if our governments are not allowing us, even if our governments are not investing in this area? I ask that question because sometimes I meet people, especially who have the means, for example, to purchase some technologies, apps, and so on. Mm-hmm. They're not using. They say, hey, I'm old school, I'm not interested. I find sometimes leaders, I'm talking about in the diaspora, where you don't have any restraining from any challenge or any limitations or any blockage from a government, like in the United States or in Europe or Australia. And this kind of countries, you have access, you have the means to do it, but some people are not still doing that. For example, they say, hey, I just want to use the old email protocols. I just don't want to use the latest platforms like Yahoo, Google. And sometimes I meet leaders, they don't have even calendar, which is freely accessible from Google. Because of that, they miss some appointments. Sometimes.
I know what I'd like to ask. I wonder if they would prefer, when they're going from here to Los Angeles, from here being in Maryland on the east coast of the United States, when they travel to the west coast, I would suggest they ride a horse. Because, I mean, you know, hey, that's old school.
Yeah.
I mean, that's old school. You know, heck, cars and planes, I mean, come on. We just ride a horse and take, you know, 6 months to get out there. We can get out there in 6 hours. You see that? So you see, that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about voodoo. We're not talking about evil. We're talking about progress. We're talking about being able to do more with our lives, give our families greater opportunities, increase the standard of living of our communities. This is not just trying to hold on to some old school notion. This is about progress, and I understand when people say progress can be evil. Progress, there's a downside. Of course there is. There's a downside to freedom. Okay, when you give people the freedom to govern themselves and to determine what they're going to become, there's a risk there. But that risk is worth taking, because what you get is a society that is growing, and you get a society that's thriving, instead of a society that is being oppressed and a society that's being put in a corner and made to submit.
Yeah, this is really disappointing, but the point we're trying to cross to our audience is that, yes, the government is repressive, it doesn't want to open up, but as people, as culture, we have to be pro-technology, go out and use technologies as far as we have the means, so that even if the government is trying to block us from being empowered, knowing the knowledge that we need to transform our community, our life, we have to go one further step, bypass that, and be pro-technologies. That's the point we're trying to across to our audience.
Well, and I wanted to show you something else that could help your audience to understand that the rest of the world is moving along here with this, and we need to make sure we're not missing it. If you look at this, I call it the rapidly changing landscape, and this is a bit like a timeline that goes from 2003 till the present time. And I've zoomed in on it so that you can see it just a little bit better. So if you look at here at the early stages of this, and what it's doing is it's showing you a timeline of development of the internet and broadband. And so this is interesting. By 2008, now this was only 6 years ago, by 2008, developing countries had more than 50% of the world's internet users. And then, if we go down the timeline a little further, by 2012, just 3 years ago, developing countries had more than 50% of the world's broadband subscribers. That's your high-speed internet. So you see, the growth of this is gone almost exponential. In fact, if you look at the number of internet users that have the milestones that we have hit, 2006 we hit 1 billion users, 2011 we hit 2 billion, and now 2015 we've hit 3. So you'll notice the rate is increasing. So we went from 1 billion to 2 billion in 5 years. Now we've gone to our next billion in 4 years. And I guarantee you, we're going to hit our next billion in less than 3, because this thing is exploding. And so this is just to give your viewers just a little, again, an awareness of where is the rest of the world on all of this. Where are we just sitting around old school? Are we sitting around just, no, I don't want any of that television, I don't want any of that computer stuff, I just want to read a book and sit with my candle? No, that is not where the world is going, and we really do need to take stock of that.
Exactly. It's a very interesting data. I would like to compare that with the data I mentioned earlier. I mentioned that the broadband access rate, for example, in Ethiopia is 0.25. Yes. So from your data, more than 50% of broadband subscribers in the world, in the developing countries. So you can see how much Ethiopia has been lagging behind from the rest of the world, even from the developing countries.
Right, less than 1%. That's, I mean, and then if you then look at this chart about the population, percent population using the internet, it's no surprise that North America and developing Asia Pacific and Western Europe, those are the lines that are up on the top. And then if you'll notice down at the bottom, Sub-Saharan Africa is at the bottom. And it's just, well, it supports all the data that you've been giving. I mean, this just says the same thing.
Yeah, we're trying to provide some background to our audience to talk about what's going on right now. It's most importantly how to change this trend. Otherwise, it's obvious. I believe that our audience already know that, but we have given them enough data to back up our claim, which is Ethiopia has been lagging behind not only from developing countries, from African average, even from her neighbors. Now, I would like us to talk about the what part, what's going on, and I want to tell you a little bit data that I have got already. I learned that, of course, it's obvious to many people that the telecom, which is a main, the monopoly of telecommunication, is owned by the government, and the main media that people use in Ethiopia to communicate across the country is radio. It's not internet. And what is sad about this is that now people, for example, when they open email, it takes them 6 minutes. When they open attachments using internet to open email attachment, it takes them 10 minutes. Even that 1.9% access to the internet is very, very slow. And it's also very, very expensive, because Ethiopia is one of the top next to Central African Republic in terms of expensiveness.
Cost of the internet service?
For example, for people to buy computer and also pay for
internet connection
and so on is very costly.
Wow.
Because of that, this is the most expensive country next to the Central African Republic. That's what's going on in Ethiopia. People just to open an email, it takes them 6 minutes. To just open an email attachment, it takes them 10 minutes. The world, I cannot tolerate more than 1 second.
Oh, I'm already banging on the table. Yeah, right.
Waiting 6 minutes to open
for one email.
Yeah, this is a very sad situation, and I don't understand why the government spend time somewhere else in terms of spying people, buying expensive spyware, paying lobbyists and so on to suppress oppositions, journalists and so on. But they're not spending money to allow people to have this decent access to email.
Well, at some point in this conversation, I've got some good news for your listeners, okay? Because what you just described there just made my head hurt, okay? I can't even imagine trying to work like that. But there is technology that allows you to run your applications on a server somewhere else, and it's a very powerful server, and the server just sends display data to your monitor. And so all of the processing is going on over there on that server. And there are some engineers in that data center that are managing that server for you. They're taking care of everything, all the updates, all the maintenance, making sure your data is safe and can't get stolen, doesn't get lost. They're professionals. They're doing all of that for you. And all you do is make a connection to that server, and you have a keyboard and a mouse and a monitor, but none of the processing is going on your end. And it's fast, but here's the really big deal. It only takes 28K of data pipe, meaning that half of the bandwidth of a 56K modem connected to a phone line is enough to have a completely functional desktop experience. And I guarantee it will not take 6 minutes to open up an email. It'll take 6 seconds. In fact, hopefully it'll only take 2 seconds. But it's very low end. Now think about the cost here. I don't have to buy a computer. All I have to buy is a very thin device. Now when I say a thin device, my tablet, that's a thin device. But I've also got a thin laptop, and it's not because it's thin like this. It's thin because it doesn't have a hard drive. What? Doesn't have a hard drive? Well, then what do you... It doesn't need a hard drive. All you needed was that phone line, a modem, and a connection back to that server. And now all it needs is for 28K to refresh my screen so I can see what I'm doing over there, and then I send keyboard and mouse data back to it. And so it's very low cost. The cost of my device, much less than even a laptop. And then all I need is a telephone line and a modem. Now, I will have to lease that server space. I will have to lease that. And so you're going to be paying a monthly fee, but that's exactly what you're doing for your telephone. You're paying a monthly fee for that. And so you're paying monthly fee if you have television. You're paying we're paying monthly fees for lots of things, and this would just be another one of them. However, you would not have to have the initial expense of buying a computer or standing up a set of computers in a server farm for your business. You do not have to be the technologist, is my point. Let the technologists like me handle all that in the back, and all you do is just work on your keyboard and mouse and just do what you're going to do for your business, for your personal life, whatever it is. But you don't have to have the computer, nor do you have to have high-speed internet access. So as a stopgap, if you will, as a way of getting some entry in to technology without the high front-end costs. This, and we can put up on the screen now, we could put up this slide about a technology called Citrix. And there are other ones like it, but this is the best one. I've been working with this technology for over 20 years. It's extremely good. It provides a full Windows desktop experience using a very low-end device. Like I said, a thin device, a tablet, a laptop without a hard drive, and a phone line for your internet service. Bandwidth requirements are only 28K. Back-end, now, 28K, that's for normal typing and so forth. If you're trying to run a video from there, hey, bandwidth is a lot more. And again, why have we gone to this high bandwidth? Well, because we've gone to the high bandwidth, we're now able to push pictures and video out through the internet, through YouTube, through Facebook, through Pinterest, or whatever. We can put our pictures up online in the cloud and save them there, share them with our friends. My mother-in-law, who doesn't, she's older and she didn't want anything to do with computers. And now she's on and she gets to see the kids' pictures after we've had a family event. She can look them right there on her computer, and she's loving it. But it's because she's connected. It's because she has access. So this Citrix technology, like I said, back-end services, including hosting of all of your applications and data, as well as the computers they run on, are provided by a third party. And so the entry cost is very low, but you're getting very high-end technology for that low-end entry fee.
So if we go back to our question, why Ethiopia has been lagging behind in using IT, we mentioned that it's political reason. Right. Otherwise, cost of entry wouldn't have been a reason, or lack of technocrats shouldn't have been a reason. The question then is, now if the entry cost is low and you don't need to be a technocrat to use technologies, to have access to knowledge and then power, but the problem with the Ethiopian government, it doesn't open the space to, for example, private companies. It doesn't, for example, Citrix, it may provide a very low-cost entry to many people to have access to the internet. I mean, it would be even possible to have like 50 or 60% or even 70% of Ethiopians having access to the internet. The problem is the Ethiopian government monopolizes telecom. They don't want to privatize. That is the main issue. If it was privatized, it would have been very easy for people to have access to the internet, and then people get empowered. When people are getting empowered, they become innovative, they become creative, they compete with the rest of the world, with the region and the rest of the world. You have great solution providers as your citizens. You could have been able to achieve your development goals and so on and so forth.
Let me ask you: was the phone the phone is owned by the government? Okay, the telecommunications, but do most people in Ethiopia have access to telephone?
Well, let's talk about that. Still, the telephone access, the cell phone access in Ethiopia is lagging behind the neighboring countries and Africa.
Right.
It's in the 20% something. But
that's cell phone. Now, how about landlines? How about regular telephones? You don't have.
You see, the sad thing is that the government, while it deprives people from having access to fix their telephone or cell phone or internet, they have their own system. For example, they have called Warada Net. Warada in Ethiopia is almost equivalent to counties. This is kind of counties net. This is administrative structure where the government coordinates its political activities.
But it's on a very small, localized scale, and then they'll do it over here, but nothing's connected and not.
It is connected, but only Warada to Warada. It's only connecting administrative people.
Okay, all right. So it's
And
not
also
it's not hadn't been set up for global for commerce.
No.
Okay.
And also they have this school net, which is also connecting schools. I heard up to 500 schools in Ethiopia are connected through internet.
Okay.
But it's only
It's
for
a local
propaganda purpose, just to broadcast some of their political message. They're not opening up these opportunities to the rest of the public. And it's very sad because even the internet, even the cell phone, we talked about 20% something, which is the lowest in Africa. Still, the majority of these cell phones are not internet powered. That means people don't have really access to information. They can text whenever they feel like there is a demonstration or some kind of opposition activities. They delay text sometimes for hours and days.
Before what?
For example, you text just to coordinate, let's say, a protest or express your anger about some policies and so on. So since they control it, by the way, Ethiopia is the only sub-Saharan African countries that filter the internet. The only sub-Saharan African. So they filter also texts on the cell phone so that people won't communicate using text.
Okay. Well, those issues, those constraints those are big ones, and they're not solvable, quickly.
Yep.
But because of what you're doing here on this program, giving people information, the more they know, the more they will talk among themselves. They will have meetings in their communities, and they will proposition the government. They will pressure the government. They will demand that they have certain services provided for them. And that's the way it is for any group of people in any country in the world. That's what the United States did the same thing back a couple hundred years ago. They were protesting against England, and so they did their own thing, and so that became a new country with a new set of rules. But so the thing is, if your viewers know that there is a possibility of them being able to, if they can get phone access, then there is a possibility of them getting access to some higher end technology and for a low entry point. So that, I think that if a community were to come together and decide that they wanted to bring in a consultant, because there are organizations around the world that will provide money, donors that will provide money for projects like this, for development, community development, and so forth. But the problem ends up being is that some of these people give their money to a government, and then the people never see it. And so I would say to your viewers that knowing this and then coming together and pooling your knowledge and your resources together, and then working and then bringing in a consultant that can help you put some of these pieces together and do it privately. It wouldn't be a national thing. It wouldn't be even necessarily a state thing. It would be something on your community level. But when one community does that and another community does that, eventually the people are going to gain strength, and they're going to have influence on what if the government wants to continue to have control, they're going to have to relent to some degree on this keeping everybody in the dark ages. And yes, we do know why they're trying to do that. But the people can speak out, and eventually, if enough of them do, and they show an increase in productivity, an increase in innovation, an increase in gross domestic product, if you will. In other words, what we produce as a community and what we can sell out on the world market. Once those things start happening, the government is going to realize that it doesn't make sense to hold them back. This makes more sense for us to get into the global community, and the pressure will be such that eventually we can't guarantee they're going to relent, because that's not, we can't say something like that. But I would be willing to bet you that if we started on this path of seeking out technology, seeking out contractors and organizations that would be accountable, that would make sure the money that's being donated is getting to us so that we can apply it to our community and apply it to this process. I would say that there would be dramatic improvements and changes.
Yeah. By the way, ESAT, that's why ESAT has been providing this kind of information, broadcasting to Ethiopia via satellite, and also posting its video footage on its website, on YouTube, and so on. But still, people could be able to get the satellite broadcast, but they couldn't be able to access the video footage from the website because they block it.
Right.
This is the only country in Sub-Saharan filtering the internet, blocking. People could be able to use proxy servers and have access to these blocked websites, but they also block some known proxy servers. So they're doing their best. But as you said, people have to find ways to circumvent, to bypass these kind of restraints, so that they could be able to get knowledge and empower themselves. They should not wait until the government opens up. But I agree with you that at the end of the day, they can't keep the people in the dark, because they can't have middle class people who could be able to transform this country without opening up the technology side. Can you tell us that? Is it possible to a country to transform itself to something, let's say, developed countries without using technology, without empowering its people?
No.